Welcome everyone to AlphaCode. Some of you may be wondering where you're sitting. AlphaCode is the home of FinTech in South Africa. It's an initiative that was developed by Rand Merchant Investment Holdings. And really what we try to do here is we pioneer the next frontier of financial services. So Rand Merchant has had a long history of fostering innovation in the financial services industry with large portfolio companies like MMI and Discovery and Outsurance and F&B. And really what we identified was the need to support the next wave of financial services entrepreneurs, and that's why we've set up AlphaCode. It's a club for fintech entrepreneurs and for intrapreneurs and for industry experts. And really our philosophy is if we bring the right people into the room at the right time and we have the right conversations, we can really reshape financial services in South Africa. We've currently got over 70 fintech businesses in South Africa that are members of the club. We've got over 1,000 people that are part of our broader ecosystem. So we're a thriving community. We're growing on a daily basis. And tonight is an example of one of the topics that we try to stimulate a lot of topic and a lot of debate that's very important in financial services, one of which is obviously cybercrime and cybersecurity. A lot of people would have been, this is obviously a hot topic in financial services at the moment, particularly when we've seen recent attacks, things like WannaCry. So tonight we are partnering with an amazing organization, the CDT of Africa, and we've got an incredible panelists joining us this evening, one of which is the CEO and founder of Intersect. And the reason I'm so excited about that, Skulk, is AlphaCode recently invested into Intersect in a multi-million-dollar deal. So, and they specialize in mobile authentication and security. So that is also what we set up here to do, is to identify high potential growth businesses that are doing phenomenal things in the financial services space, businesses that can go global, and Intersect is an example of that tonight. So we're very proud of what Skulk has done, and we're very excited to be part of his journey. So that's my little punt for the evening. But I think it's going to be a really interesting debate. I think it's incredibly important that we all get our heads around this, particularly in financial services, because at the end of the day, you're dealing with people's money, people who are incredibly vulnerable, and we need to be aware of these things. So I'm going to hand it over to Sharon, who's going to introduce the event and introduce CDT.
Thank you. Firstly, I just wanted to say thank you for coming out this evening, and we just are appreciative of your time. I also wanted to take the opportunity to thank Colette and to thank our friends at Rand Merchant Investment, and just to say that this is, with hope, the beginning of a wonderful relationship, and that we can continue to explore some of the things that you've mentioned. CDT is really the first of its kind in Africa. And, you know, if you ask sort of why CDT, CDT is absolutely necessary because we believe that it's important for us to help to prepare society, global society, and certainly African society as well, for the impact of disruptive technologies. We know that there are lots of ways that we can gain access to information about disruptive technologies, but it's not enough to just be aware. We've got to go beyond awareness raising to really figuring out what are we going to do. And to do that, you need partners. You need people who are going to stick around and who are going to roll up their sleeves and actually help you to gain the insights that are going to allow you to not just respond to the threat of disruptive technologies, but really to help to shape the future that you envision. And that's part of what CDT is all about. How we do that is partnerships like this one, and we do speaker salons and events that do educate and raise awareness. We've got something that we are beginning to develop, and we're exploring partnerships around that, called a Disruptor Index, that is going to produce, it's an assessment tool that will produce the analytics to help you to really understand your own preparedness for disruption, as well as what are the competitive moves that you need to make in order to be a disruptor and not disrupted. We've also developed something called a disruptive innovation strategy framework. And so we've seriously dismantled existing thinking around strategic innovation and have really developed a whole new framework that helps businesses, governments, educational institutions, et cetera, to really begin to take deep dives into the disruptive technologies, that are impacting their markets, their industries themselves, their companies, and to emerge again with real methodologies for sustained disruptive innovation. It's not enough these days for us to have kind of a bright idea and that's innovation. How do you keep doing that in a way that is systemic? And that's what we call planned, sustainable disruptive innovation. And that's really what we're committed to helping businesses to do. And then we think. So we're not just a do tank, we're a think and do tank. And then we do research as well. And that helps us to continue to do some of the other things. If you're interested to learn more about the Disruptor Index, please see Margaret O'Connor. Margaret, where are you? Somewhere? There she is. There's Margaret O'Connor, absolutely. So we spend a lot of time thinking about what are the areas of disruptive technologies that are really going to be impacting African society. Because I've mentioned that our reason for being is to help to prepare African society, not just to respond to disruptive tech, but to change those, to transform those those challenges into really opportunities. And so we know that when we look at what are those industries that are most likely to be disrupted today, banking was number one when we did our research. So we thought, let's partner with the right folks, get the right people into the room, because the fact of the matter is that today everything is connected and everyone is vulnerable, not just banks. And the real question is, what are we going to do about it? And that's why we thought future crime, cybercrime is a subset of future crime. We'll have other discussions about future crime, but we thought this was really pressing and timely and top of mind. And it's often difficult for financial services institutions to talk about these issues. So before I hand it over and we jump into the panel, there's just some rules of engagement. And then we're going to watch a short video first. But one of the things that we're not going to do today is we're not going to ask banks or financial services institutions to dig deep into their own existing strategies and talk about things that they feel are proprietary or that are going to make them vulnerable. So if we're going there, I'm going to say, no, we're not going there. Other than that, there aren't really a lot of rules. A speaker salon is designed to be an intimate affair where people really have the opportunity to talk to each other. So I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves quickly. We're going to see a video and then we'll jump in. So let's go. Can we start with you? Sorry.
Can you guys hear me? Is it actually working? So we go like this. Hello. Okay. So I'm Scott, founder of Intersect, along with a couple of engineering friends of mine. And
Here, just take mine.
Okay. We started about 7.5 years ago, building a company that really believes that mobile is the future. And we looked at obviously, in terms of banking, it's something that they have a hair on fire problem, literally, in terms of being targeted, because there's a financial incentive to be being targeted. So it's much wider now, but we think that banks actually have a much larger play in future, because they've got a trusted relationship, and we think that if you can actually resolve trust to a specific user, it brings massive opportunity. You can leverage that to actually ensure that customers and people feel safe in other things, in what they do. So in 7.5 years, we've grown from South Africa, Stellenbosch. Our software is now used in 45 countries, most out through Africa, Europe, the US, offices in a number of countries, also Europe, US, etc. And our focus and our targets are specifically on the financial services side. So we provide software to banks, and we assist them to actually ensure that this channel to their customers is safe and that we can actually leverage that going forward.
I don't know how I'm supposed to beat that introduction. Thank you, Skal. My name's Alan. I'm the CIO of RMB and the CIO of First Rand Head Office.
My name is Maxine Shaba, and I'm with the SADC Banking Association.
My name is Wayne Fitzjohn. I'm first and foremost the CEO of a company called Talent 10, which is very much venture capital, private equity focused around getting business in South Africa and Africa going and setting an example and stimulating economic growth. We are very much an industrial and tech focus. And the company I'm probably representing here today in terms of the topic is a company called IoT Next, which is a full end-to-end IoT platform, which has had huge success. We're very, very pleased to share with you. Globally, we've become a go-to IoT partner of Microsoft. We I think last week or the week before, won MTN's machine-to-machine best innovative IoT platform overall, as well as some subcategories, and also Gartner Innovator of the Year. But the big validation is when you get Forbes top 5 company executives calling you to come and help develop an IoT strategy, and that's been homegrown, and that's something we're very, very proud of.
You're good? Okay. Perfect. Okay, so we're gonna just take a quick squiz at a video that helps us to frame the issue, and then we're gonna jump in.
Most dangerous hackers in the world. Since the age of computers, the art of hacking has become more and more prevalent. As technology progresses, the technical prowess needed to be a skilled backdoor pirate is ever-changing, with many underground communities responsible for catastrophic events larger than the average person may realize. Although movies like War Games and Hackers portray this profession in an entertaining light, the skill set and talent needed in reality is objectively much more complicated than the films may lead you to believe. From unknown prodigies to large and potentially dangerous communities of programming geniuses, today, let's take a look at 7 of the most elite hackers to ever exist. Number 7, Astra. Taking his name from the Sanskrit word for weapon, this Greek mathematician was responsible for the theft of weapons technology data for over 5 years, making an impressive mark on the hacking world by infiltrating the computers of French aviation company, the Dassault Group, with highly classified information such as confidential data concerning heavy military aircraft being lifted. Dassault suffered damages in excess of $360 million as Astra sold the information to different countries and to over 250 different individuals for half a decade. Somehow keeping his true identity hidden to this day, he has been a wanted man since 2002. Number 6, Albert Gonzalez. This American-born hacker is responsible for one of the largest credit card and ATM frauds in history. From 2005 to 2007, this young Cuban used SQL injection to deploy backdoors on several corporate systems in order to launch packet sniffing, a complicated process that basically amounted to the theft of computer data from internal corporate networks as a means to sell and redistribute over 170 million card numbers. With 3 federal indictments, 2 in 2008 for Dave & Buster's and TJ Maxx cases, and another in 2009 for his involvement with the Heartland payment incident, he was subsequently tried and sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Number 5, Kevin Mitnick. Born on August 6, 1963, Kevin Mitnick was once upon a time the world's most wanted hacker. First hacking in 1979, he initially broke into Digital Equipment Corporation's operating system software, copying their infrastructure and putting him on the map. However, by the mid-90s, Mitnick was a full-blown fugitive, on the lam from officials for over 2.5 years. After a heavily covered pursuit, the FBI took Mitnick into custody at his Raleigh, North Carolina apartment in 1995, seizing over 100 cloned cell phone codes and heaps of false IDs. After serving 5 years in prison, including 8 grueling months in solitary confinement, he has turned his life around, now owning his own professional security consulting company. Number 4, Kevin Poulsen. Although less aggressive than some of the entries on this list, Kevin Poulsen's mischievous crimes landed him in some seriously hot federal water. Known as Dark Dante, Poulsen, then in his early 20s, staged a takeover of LA-based radio station KIIS-FM in order to secure that he would be the 102nd caller for a promotional contest they were holding, with a Porsche 944 S2 as his lucky prize. After the FBI got wind of the incident, he was instantly upgraded to fugitive status, running from officials, but eventually being apprehended and caught with 7 counts of mail, wire, and computer fraud, money laundering, and additional charges. Now out of prison, Poulsen is currently a contributing editor for Wired. Number 3. Anonymous. The massive decentralized hacktivist group, dubbed Anonymous, have been an incredibly prolific example of online hacking since 2003. Known for their political, social, and sometimes devious hacking campaigns directed towards such high-profile targets like the FBI, CIA, Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, Sony, the Church of Scientology, the Vatican, and more. These self-proclaimed digital Robin Hoods intimidate their targets by means of Guy Fawkes masks and an ominous mantra: "We are anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us." First started as a way for members of the internet forum 4chan to pull pranks, it slowly morphed into the massive vigilante justice system it has become today. Number 2. Vladimir Levin. This Russian hacker made international headlines after successfully breaking into Citibank's computer infrastructure in 1995, obtaining almost $10 million that he later rerouted to various global bank accounts. However, whereas most hackers on this list used a computer, the clever Ruski utilized telecommunications systems to monitor customer conversations, painstakingly transcribing private account information spoken over the lines. Ultimately, everything but $400,000 was recovered by authorities, leading to a bevy of charges and a 3-year prison sentence. Levin was ordered to pay back $240,000 to Citibank, and although he was caught, we can't help but think he still got off pretty easy. Number 1. Gary McKinnon. This Scottish computer prodigy is arguably one of the most elite there is, simply in terms of sheer accomplishments and baffling motivations. Between 2001 and 2002, McKinnon set forth on a quest to prove the existence of UFOs, hacking 97 American military networks including NASA, installing viruses, deleting files, and even leaving a cheeky message on a governmental homepage that read, "Your security is crap." After successfully shutting down the US military's Washington network, comprised of about 2,000 computers for 24 hours, his feat became the biggest military hack of all time. Since arrested, the US has tried multiple times to extradite him, but McKinnon still resides within...
Don't know what happened to that, but you got the idea, right? Cybercrime is proliferating, and this video is dated, by the way. So we're going to talk about how disruptive technologies, and we'll talk a little bit about what those really are driving the sophistication of cyber criminals, and so things are happening as fast and furious. So I think I'll start with you, Skulk. I don't know, can you all hear me okay? I've got a, it's for the video. Testing, hello, is this working? Cool, okay, good. So I'm gonna start with you, Skulk. You know, what do you consider, let's just first understand, what is cybercrime really? And why is it such a big issue right now? And a lot of these folks that you saw on this video were, you know, a lot of them seem to be American. Maybe it was just an American video, but we know that this is a global threat. At the same time, it seems like we here in South Africa are getting more than our fair share of cyber attacks. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us, what is cybercrime? Why is it such a big issue right now? And why does it seem that cyber criminals are targeting us here in South Africa?
Okay, so a couple of questions, and all very interesting, I think, in terms of what cybercrime is. Perhaps Alan also later can give his thoughts on that. But in terms of cybercrime, obviously it depends on what you're after. So it's either private information and somebody getting a hold of that information, or financial information, where the intent obviously is to not make that available in the public domain. So what we see is, in terms of South Africa being targeted, it's a first world banking infrastructure, but of course we have third world neighbors and also porous borders, and that means that a lot of people can actually get the cash, move it quite quickly into into cash itself, and then just jump the border. So in terms of what cybercrime is, unfortunately, this is a bit dated, as you mentioned. I think the days of obviously you get anonymous and these big hackers, but in terms of targeting a bank nowadays, and also the reason why there's such an increase is you don't need a tremendously tech-savvy person anymore. You can literally go on the dark web and purchase, I want to hack Bank A, and yes, some malware, and perhaps a DDoS attack, and you can even get an SLA or a service-level agreement for your hacking kit. So it's a scary world out there, unfortunately.
It's very scary as well. Just as an aside, seriously, and this is no kidding, I wanted to get, and we went back and forth between trying to get a real hacker here so that we could actually talk, like a serious, like a black hat hacker. And I went into the deep web looking for one to come and talk to us. And it was a very, very scary experience. 4chan, I got involved with 4chan and some of those guys. And, they're criminals, a lot of, the ones who claim that they're just doing it to help society, they're those. But it's a very scary place.
Definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
So he's right. The interesting part about cyber as a crime is how it's defined. So insurance policies, if money is stolen, it's counted as theft. So in terms of insurance policies, your cyber policy doesn't cover you against theft. Your policy on theft covers you on theft. So your cybercrime policy for insurance only covers things like a DDoS attack where your clients weren't able to draw money because your ATMs were being prevented, or there's other consequential costs, but not the actual money that leaves the bank. That actually has to be covered by your theft policy. So people need to be very careful when they think they've got cyber insurance, what it actually covers.
Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go through a round of questions, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to take the mic and to have an interchange, and we can get through that maybe again, and then give it back to you, and then by then it'll be time for us to have some more drinks and talk to each other, and then after that go home. Okay, so my second question is going to be directed towards Wayne, and the question is really, how are cyber criminals leveraging technologies such as blockchain and IoT to become more sophisticated in their attacks? We're the Center for Disruptive Technologies, and we spend a lot of time looking at disruptive technologies. And we know 3D printing, artificial intelligence, augmented intelligence, big data, predictive analytics, the Internet of Things. These are all disruptive technologies that are growing exponentially and that have the capacity to create new markets and new value chains, and at the same time they have the capacity to disrupt existing markets and value chains and displace market leaders and alliances and products as well. So there are many of us who are trying to get our mind around, Wayne, what is the Internet of Things, first of all? And how do you think that this technology is actually enabling cyber criminals to become even more sophisticated in their attacks?
So I'm going to give this a skip. Okay, try this one. The Internet of Things is what the world is classifying as the fourth industrial revolution. So essentially what companies, what governments, what households, what cities, we've even been approached by 2 countries with IoT strategies where they're trying to connect everything that can possibly be connected, not just for the sake of connecting it, but to see by aggregating the data there how they can do more with less and become, optimize whatever it is they strive for. We're very active in a number of industries in South Africa, but I'm going to pick one, the one that's really been, in my opinion, under quite a bit of an attack, on a number of fronts, is the mining one. It's very hard to stay relevant in mining these days. You've got labor issues, you've got mineral rights issues, you've got BE issues, you've got charter, government, licensing, occupational health and safety. It's very, very tough to make money in mining, and so mines are turning towards this type of technology to see how they can unlock greater efficiencies, increase safety, make labor more effective, and make more money doing so, and control from pit to port. So in order to do that, there's this dichotomy between, connecting everything And by connecting everything, these guys will tell you you're creating multiple entry points for hackers to attack you, and then at the same time making it as secure as possible that only they can use it. Do you remember Terminator, Skynet? That's essentially what we're fighting against here. And funnily enough, we're aware of a particular hacker or virus, that malware that's been created called Mirai, that turns all these edge devices into bots. And that's a scary, scary prospect. And the reason that's happening is, most, and surprisingly, most of the mechanisms being used there to connect all these edge devices, which we typically term field gateways, are using open source software. Most of them are Linux based. And having an open source software platform, operating system running the thing that's connecting everything in your network or in your ecosystem on there is an invitation to be hacked. And that's one of the reasons we're doing quite well, is we believe in creating an agnostic platform where you can connect all edge devices and integrate into every bit of software, proprietary, third party, whatever the case may be, and create this dashboard and view for you to be able to control everything. But we haven't made our field gateway open source. So it can connect to everything, but we've kept it very, very tight so that you determine who and what can gain access to that. And that's been the big win for us as a South African company. But that's essentially the nightmare that organizations have. They want to connect everything. They want to be able to integrate it into pretty much every telecommunications platform so that you can have data flowing freely, real time, so that you use it to your benefit. But therein lies the conundrum.
Absolutely. And that's a good segue to the next question, which really I had for Alan, and that's just about how precisely what Wayne just talked about. I mean, we're increasingly connected. I want my bank. I want to be able to bank from anywhere I am, where I travel in the world. I want to be able to utilize my mobile phone to do my banking. There's so many aspects of how you need to be responding to my needs and my demands as a consumer that's increasing the pressure on you to connect to me in all kinds of different ways, which seems to, if we're listening to what Wayne is saying, depending on how safe our system really is, could be increasing the vulnerability of banks. How are you coping with all of this pressure? And what do you think is driving this increase in attacks? We've had a conversation. The amount of attacks that are increasing on banks all over the world, and certainly South African banks, is actually increasing. So they're having this increase in attacks, and at the same time, we're demanding more of them in terms of how they service our needs as consumers. How are you managing this pressure?
Yeah, to your point of the amount of attacks, if you look at the amount of personal information and financial information people are putting onto their devices which are connected to the internet, people are just actually sticking up their hand and saying, hit me, hit me. So the main trend is away from trying to protect the device to more protecting the data, because I can't protect the devices. I don't know what every single client has, what device they have, what operating system they have, whether they've patched the machine, haven't patched the machine. So it's more around protecting the data. And you need to get to a point where the best part of every single one of your applications has dual factor authentication. You can't get to a point where single factor authentication and insecure mechanisms like SMSs are used, because those can be intercepted exceptionally easy. So it's also getting to a point where you try and reduce your users, especially if I look internally to the bank, their ability to manipulate their machine. So 98% of all infections come because a person has local admin rights. Take it away. Have two profiles on the machine, one with local admin rights, one without. Use the one without local admin rights for every single day. That way you reduce your ability to get an infection on your machine. So it's changing behavior, which is very slow. We find it's two things. Financial, people fall for it every time. And the second is vanity. People are looking at your LinkedIn profile, everyone clicks on it. You can make money, everyone clicks on it. So it's how do you get people to protect themselves, and because the external client can't, it's more around protecting the data.
Yeah, sounds like there needs to be some more education and awareness raising in terms of consumer behavior. And
Yeah, the problem with the consumer is they don't learn. Everyone thinks it's someone else's problem. Everyone thinks if you've got antivirus and you've got a firewall, you're safe. I mean, Skulk was talking earlier about getting things as a service. We can go and get antivirus breaking as a service. Compile your malware, send it against every commercial piece of antivirus, and until it passes, you keep going, and once it passes, you send it as part of a phishing campaign. So you made the point earlier about how has the new technology helped. It hasn't helped us, it's hindered us. Because all of the things that you used to need a very advanced person to do, very rudimentary user can now construct as a service and consume as a service fairly cost efficiently. So it no longer takes the people that were mentioned in that video to do things when you've got people who are very uneducated, and what we find is don't get educated.
interesting. We'll come back to that. I know Skalk has something that he wants to add. I've got a question for Maxine, and then I'm going to turn it over to you. But we're gonna put a post-it on that one and come back, because I mean we could certainly debate that, right? And so also have an interesting discussion around how exponentially growing disruptive technologies have allowed us to have access to financial services and products in ways that we couldn't before, right? So we're going to come back to that. All right. Okay. So you had something you wanted to
Yeah,
say.
actually, a couple of comments on that. So it's we always find it quite interesting that a bank says, listen, you know, studies show it costs a 43rd of the price to service somebody actually, you know, on a mobile channel as compared to person to person. Of course, in a connected world, we want access to everything, and training users, in our view, doesn't work. Because you cannot expect a customer, and you know, obviously there's uneducated or untrained. It's you don't know who your customer is. You cannot expect them to look out for this. Beyond the, you know, you get SSL injection and says, you know, all sorts of fancy words. I don't think anybody can be expected. I think a bank needs to ensure that the customer has the tools. So I agree, obviously, in terms of two-factor authentication, that's what we do, and we use it very successfully. But I like it that banks always say, listen, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, but please use our stuff. You know, so it's quite interesting.
Okay, it's getting good. It's getting interesting. All right, so we're going to have to come back to that one as well and give Alan a chance to respond. Okay, here's a question for Maxine. Maxine, what, if any, measures should governments and regulators be taking to assist businesses, including banks, to manage this increasing threat of cyber attacks, cybercrime in general? I mean, you're
Right, very difficult question, right? I think from a government point, really, and I would be speaking out of turn for every government because I work in the SADC area. But the reality is, do governments have the capacity? And that's the first reality. Do you have the expertise? I mean, if we think of, what do they call them now, the Y generation, I'm not too sure where we're at. But that generation are very fast. I mean, we can't keep up with them. So if we look at that generation wants everything on their mobile. They want to walk with the mobile. They don't have time to come into a bank, to fill in a form, et cetera, et cetera. That's not their world. And if you want to try and live in that world, I'm just going to be funny now and think of the DRC. Any Congolese, no offense to you, I love the DRC very much, one of my favorite countries. But if I'm just thinking, they've got their own struggles on the ground. Government is just trying to sort itself out or not. You never know which is what. There's a lot of paperwork, but yet at the same time, you've enabled people to use mobile money. So one of the other days I was sitting with one of the service providers, and they say government pays their employees through their e-wallets. But payments are not every day, right? It's not every month. They're not guaranteed a payment every month, their salary. So what happens is the person takes the SIM card out of the phone puts it under their pillow, and waits for that day when payment is going to be made. In the meantime, mobile companies have probably disabled that some card, and payment has been made. And where has the payment been made to? So back to your problem of education. So you can only educate so much. I think governments are faced with a huge challenge. I think it's not about what can governments do for us. I think we have to work with governments. And this is a conversation we're having earlier with Alan. I think we need to get into a partnership with governments. Couple of years ago, we went to one of them, this was in South Africa, went to one of the government departments and said, this is what we want to do. Now we're rolling out a project within the SADC where we're trying to look at interoperability in terms of the mobile money space. And so we say we'd like to do this. Well, those of us who know why M-Pesa failed, this was one of the issues, is that in South Africa, you can't really do mobile money or cross-border banking, as we would term it in our terms. And we were told, no, you are storing money in the phone. And we said, no, the phone is just a channel, like the internet would be a channel. You're drawing money from your bank account. No, you're storing money in the phone. And that was the end of that conversation. And we had to leave because we were storing money in the phone. So there's also that level of understanding. What is this technology we're providing? So you go into another country and they'll say to you, you banks don't want to service us, which is what I get every day. You banks don't want to service us. In deep Lilongwe out there, my mother needs banking service, and there's no brick and mortar. And so guess what? We're going to enable the cell phone companies and or mobile operators to provide that service to us. And that service is being provided. So what do we as banks do? Do we sit down and say, okay, it's being provided and let's walk away, or do we engage as well? So then forces us into that space as well. But yes, it comes with its own threats. You have to work with the regulators. How fast they are, so they want one thing, they'll tell you that must happen there. But so half the time the legislation behind that is not there. And then, so that's the one problem. Then you as the citizen, because I've taken your money, has gone missing somewhere in the transaction. Guess where the citizen is very soon? Back at the government's doorstep or at the bank's doorstep, demanding my 500 Rand, which has gone missing somewhere, and nobody knows where. So really, I think, Sharon, we have to work. It's difficult, I know. I think from our space, the nice thing is we can create what we want to create. But, and because maybe the environment is enabling, I mean, South Africa is punted as one of the best in the world in terms of banking service. But then there's the flip to the coin. Do our regulators understand what we're doing? In South Africa, I think the tech companies, to a certain extent, especially those working with the banks, are supposed to register themselves at PASA. Now, does everybody go and register? We don't know. The bank will say they need the specific element in their back office, and they do need it for whatever reason. They need it because, cutting edge and providing you, the client who wants to walk around with your phone, a service. So it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. But I think really, I think it's time for us as a sector, and I think I see it being done, but probably we have to engage more. And there are lots of things like, well, there's the one thing of engaging with the regulator, and then there's the other thing of the regulators amongst themselves engaging with each other. And that's another story altogether. So we try, one step at a time. Not easy.
No, these are difficult questions, and part of, one of the main motivators for us coming up with this topic and bringing you all together here in the Speaker Salon is because we're interested in forging those kinds of partnerships and asking the tough questions. And then, actually, when I was driving here, I saw the Rand Merchant Bank big banner out there, think, pull, together. Because, increasingly it seems like the cyber criminals are certainly colluding and using technology to really come up with all kinds of ways of collaborating, and they're obviously able to respond very rapidly. So I do think that you're right. We're going to have to not just wait for government to come up with the solutions. We're going to have to be engaging and really moving to sort out some of our own concerns. I'm going to turn this over now to you all. They've said some interesting things. I'm sure you've got your own ideas. You've been invited here. And so questions, comments about anything that you're hearing so far? Yep. I think that one might be better.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Please introduce yourself and tell us who you are, and then ask your question or make your comment.
All right, my name's Mark Nasila. I look after advanced analytics at FNB. But I have a comment and maybe a question. Don't you think the level of cybercrime is actually evolving because as a crime itself, it's encouraged in some countries? If you think, for example, Russia, if you think a lot of countries in Europe, while financial institutions are doing their best to fight those types of crime, there are people who are actually supporting it and making it a culture in some countries. For example, Julian, the WikiLeaks guy, as much as he has a lot of enemies, he still has support out there, and he has got encouragement. That's why he's continued to do that. In fact, I'm worried so much. I'm not so worried about the financial side of it. I'm worried about the cybercrime related to power and control over different regions. Looks like it's evolving so much, and it might be a big worry.
Yeah, listen, it is a big worry. In the States, if you as an institution can prove that it was government-backed, as an example, it's looked at a national security, and then the FBI step in, and you don't actually have to tell anyone. So the last time JP Morgan got hacked, despite spending $400 million on cyber, they tried to convince the US government it was the Russians, so that they wouldn't have to tell anyone. The US government said no, and then they had to disclose it. They now spend $600 million a year on cyber, and have 1,000 people worldwide monitoring it 24 hours a day. And then you go and say, how do we as FirstRand compete with 1,000 people worldwide? When the risks are effectively the same. So for certain people it is government sponsored. For others it is just try and see what you can do. And if you succeed, great, because it's anonymous. So again, Internet of Things, how's it helped us? Things like Tor and other places which make things anonymous hinders our ability to find the people who are doing it. So it becomes a proper issue.
And it's not going to go away.
No, it's not going to go away. I think people started looking at security as a point-in-time exercise. Get an antivirus, get a firewall. It's a way of life. We will have more security software, I believe, in the next 5 to 10 years than we'll probably have line of business systems, because they will specialize in specific parts of the security stack. If you look at how many pieces of software companies have now for security versus 5 years ago, it's regions away. So it is a way of life. And I would challenge the people here to say, if they run a dev shop, how many of their developers have been on specific secure coding training? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is none. They just write code. They don't know what's insecure. They don't run it against products like SonarCube to check the security settings. So that ignorance is bliss even within the technology departments, not just in the consumer side.
Just a comment on that. On the banking side, we saw statistics, I think it was by Gartner, that last year, out of the top 60 global banks, I think it was 92% of their iOS apps had just basic security flaws. Not even SSL, which is just basic stuff, on all the links. So it is something that we believe it's a bigger bullet, thicker armor, and you need to find a partner that actually specializes in this. Find those people that actually encounter these threats in different markets and can bring it to your market. It is a specialist field, and find the specialist to actually ensure that it's being looked after.
Questions, comments?
Hi, my name is Carl. I'm an ethical hacker. So
An
yeah,
ethical
like a-
hacker. He says he's an
He's
ethical
just saying he hasn't been
Ethical.
caught yet. That's all.
Yeah, I haven't been caught yet. So, my passion is definitely towards cybersecurity and seeing it fulfilled in, the prevention thereof being fulfilled in the banking industry. So my question for you guys is, how are you guys including AI, machine learning, and disruptive technologies in your sectors, your environments?
I'm getting all the questions. So not enough is the short answer. So one of the things Sharon said, where the places where tech can help the bank is in things like AI and machine learning. Because if you look at all of the existing technologies for looking at, have you been hacked, where's the person broken in, what rights do they have, they're very rule-based. You take your SIM, it says, if you see the following activity, raise an alarm. But it's very rule-based, and what a lot of the hackers try to do is break into your SIM and look at what your rules are. Because once they understand your rules, they know how to get around your rules, they know how not to get detected. So any rule-based system is inherently flawed when it comes to cyber. What we haven't come across is really good AI or machine learning solutions to pick up patterns that the SIM doesn't pick up. And that for me is a challenge to all of you guys, is say, what is that solution? Prove to us you can find one that's better than the rules we have in the SIM, and I'm all ears.
So second part, on that topic though, if you're looking just at rule-based, are you, or besides for that, are you proactively threat hunting? Are you looking at clues and following other hunches to maybe proactively catch hackers before it's alerted?
Yes.
Is that a touchy one? I like the touchy subjects.
I think we're going to give Alan a break here in terms of disclosing. I'm going to come to you. Let me get to this gentleman here, and then we'll come to you, Malcolm. So it's sorry. Can we get this gentleman the mic? Is there? Yeah. Are they working? The light screen is. Are they working? Yeah. There we go. Right. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, just speak
Can
right
you hear
into
me?
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My name is Zef Mandela. I happen to do some work with government.
Okay.
So I'm going to attempt to make comments in response to the difficult question that was asked to my sister there representing the Banking Association. Governments have a responsibility, as you know, constitutionally, to protect the nation, its population, the people that live in its space, in terms of its sovereign space. It's a constitutional responsibility. Now, you will be aware that we started many years ago insisting on recurring these things, so that at least there can be an identity of where transactions start and terminate as part of trying to control and minimize the risk. That's a government responsibility. At least I know in South Africa we are doing that. There are still some holes here and there, but we are doing our best from that perspective. Secondly, the focus of the discussion here being financial services, we also have the FICA Act, the Financial Intelligence Center Act, which assists in making sure that we have some record, not only of identities of people that are transacting, but also a record of the transactions with assistance of the financial services infrastructure, obviously, which is also, I think, a very important government responsibility, which we are discharging. We also know that the government institutions, like intelligence, like the police, and so on, they are busy beefing up their act in terms of the capacity to be able to respond to this very important national challenge. The laws of our country already cater for institutionalizations of certain interventions, which will see government becoming very proactive in terms of providing a cordon of reduction of threat, if you like, because you can't completely get rid of the threats or the risk, but they will minimize that. And I know I've been part of some best practice visits to other places, like South Korea, where from a government facility, National Cyber Security Operations Center, you can actually monitor traffic entering the government space, foreign traffic coming in and foreign traffic, local traffic going out, and you can actually color code the threat spaces, if you like, on the map, so that you can see that this terrible traffic coming from, as an example, Kazakhstan. And you can focus on that to make sure that you minimize the threat and respond proactively. So these are things that governments more and more will have to gear themselves up to in order to protect its sovereign space in the interest of the citizens. Thank you very much.
Okay. Malcolm?
Yes, thank you. Malcolm Larson from Business Engage. Clearly, we're talking about a very, very serious subject here tonight. But if I may, I'd like to also play devil's advocate. Gentleman there mentioned Julian Assange. And clearly, we have a very long way to go. But it could very well be that in a couple of months or a couple of years, the average South African is going to be very grateful for the Gupta leaks for various reasons. So, yeah, we have a situation where, yes, that's hacking. It may, in some ways, end up being very positive for the country. And following on from that, I have as much of a problem with the government hacking, and looking at my information as I do a criminal hacking. And how would we then, try and resolve issues like that?
Sure. We had a huge issue like that with, in the United States with the NSA and people saying just that, cybercrime, Skulk, as you defined it earlier, it's not just stealing money. It can be unlawfully accessing information or data. And it's not just necessarily cyber criminals who may. But our panelists are itching to respond. I will allow them. Okay. Yep. Well, let's take one more. We're going to give it back to the panel, and then we'll go around again. Okay?
Hi, my name is Savola. I work for a bank, but I'm asking as a consumer.
Sorry, which bank? A bank?
Yes, because I'm not representing.
All right.
I'm here in my personal capacity. So I wanted to ask, and I'm picking up from Maxine's question Maxine's comments about legislation and regulation, lagging behind, notwithstanding what the gentleman there said. What I wanted to know is the guys that are, so if I were a hacker, I would take advantage of the gap in the market that there's an absence of regulation, and I can do that. Disruptive technologies are about pushing boundaries. But my question to the banks particularly, and the guys who buy this technology, they do know that there's a lag in regulation, there's a lag in legislation, right? My experience, I've found that banks usually cover themselves first in their exposure. Like if you look at debits, the 99 rands that RMB and FNB and Absa have suffered, they've usually put their exposure first before the client. So my ask is, knowing that there's a gap in the regulation, what are companies like RMB doing to make sure that they protect consumers, in the absence of legislation, when they explore these technologies that are in no man's land, more or less?
We can also ask, what is your bank doing? RMB's been very brave to put themselves on the panel here today, but there are other banks in the room. I know, because you RSVP'd, so you can also, pray tell, what are you all doing? Alan, are you okay with that?
Yeah, sure. So
we're going to go back to the panel, ask a few more questions, and then come back.
She may work for another bank, but it sounds like she banks with RMB. So.
Ooh, love it.
To answer the previous question, I really do appreciate getting the stuff from WikiLeaks and the other organizations, because if you don't know what you don't know, you can't fix it. The challenge we have is you can't release 100 vulnerabilities all in one go. So WannaCry as an example, had we patched? Yes. Had we gone through certain windows? Yes. But then when every single vendor releases patches, I have my entire team working the entire weekend to patch. My ability to test and to make sure it's all done in time so that every hacker in the world doesn't have that leak and then tries to use that vulnerability, actually leaves a bad taste in the mouth. So it's, if they released it responsibly, I'd have no issue. Release all of it, because then we can fix. We can't fix what we don't know. Protecting clients, if you take something like the F&B app and the R&B app, we've moved away from things like SMS, password stuff. And Skulk made the comment earlier of us promoting banking services. Yes, we want people to be able to transact, but we want to be able to do it securely.
You know, when we've done some preliminary research, and like I said, we exist to kind of take these deep dives and then to help our customers, our clients, our partners to emerge with insights about how we can do something about the challenges that we're facing. Tonight we're talking about cybercrime. You know, based on our research at CDT, the majority of the banks, and I'm taking the heat off of Alan now, and I'm Pearl. Is it Pearl? Yeah, Pearl. I know there's someone here from NetBank, someone here from. So it's not R&B. This is not an R&B question. This is a comment. This is a comment. No, I'm just giving you a hard time. I know it's not. But based on our research, the majority of the banks, first of all the industries, banking seems to be suffering most in terms of cyber attacks. You would agree with that? Okay. But when we look at the proactive measures that they're taking, and let's not get down into whether it's necessarily protecting the bank itself or protecting your account as a client, et cetera. We're just talking just in terms of systems of protection. It seems that across the board, they have not embraced technologies like the IoT and some of the breakthroughs where you can move beyond these kinds of legacy systems which have, it seems, components that, you know, Wayne, you and I were talking about a little bit earlier, that are open source that seem to kind of, I don't know, be an invitation for somebody to come in. So what seems to be holding banks back from embracing the disruptive technologies that can help them to ward off the attacks? So I'm going to throw that one out there to you, Wayne, come back to Skulk, and then I've got some more questions for you all.
Look,
you just have to talk like really.
No, the light was off. Okay, so I mean, I don't know why, and I don't know if that is the case, that banks aren't embracing it. I don't think I can make that generalization. But again, speaking from the Internet of Things point of view, why are we trying to connect everything? What is it? What is the point? What is the objective behind it? Because essentially, by connecting everything, you are making many more entry points you have to defend. You're creating more of a security nightmare in terms of what we're talking about. You're potentially doing so. But you know, when you look at the objective behind it, it's aggregation of data. We're using, and this is Forbes, not me saying, Forbes is saying we typically tap into about 0.5% of the data we have at our disposal. That's what we're mining right now. So the whole point of Internet of Things is so that you can aggregate that data and filter it and mine it so that you're getting exactly, you know, the best utilization out of that, which is essentially what you own. Which you can't see. I mean, one of the questions or one of the statements we deal with quite regularly is we don't know what we don't know. Every time we've done an integration, immediately there's some learning that you never ever had an inclination to even start looking in that direction. So when you start to aggregate data and you can start to packetize data in a way that you can channel it into these really crazy analytics tools that are out there, I can tell you, I mean, the big players are spending billions and billions and billions of dollars in terms of creating the tools that help you use the data in a way that is going to best serve you. So from a financial services perspective, you know, you have to first connect to be able to access that, and that's the same for every single industry, and then you have to start mining that data and start understanding that which you don't know. And my limited understanding is when you start to gain that understanding and that insight, and that you might see avenues that you would not have identified before that could be vulnerabilities. You might be accessing data which, you know, the 0.5% that hackers are typically targeting, and you can start to build, your own protocols, your own, start accessing information and being proactive as opposed to reactive around these things. And I think that's the whole point of this. And we like to think that the advantages to a connected world outweigh the disadvantages. If we just, seeing as it's a financial services discussion, we've engaged with banks, not around the actual money flow, but banks are losing a fortune in service level agreements, building management services, something silly like, water leakages and HVAC leakages and energy deficiency. There's huge amounts of wastage in power surges, and just understanding that can unlock huge value for shareholders and ultimately chase down costs for consumers. I think it's the embracing what we don't know. I have deep sympathy for financial services, because when you're under siege the whole time, you tend to want to defer to battening down the hatches. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Any thoughts on that, Skull?
Yeah, quite a few actually. So, I don't think that the banks actually purposefully try to actually not look after their customers. I think they do, but I think it's just in terms of inertia. It's I've heard the comment many times. We're selling this from my perspective, selling into banks that nobody's ever been fired for buying from IBM. It's their careers and stuff. And IBM unfortunately comes from a market in the US where this doesn't happen. And you have to get a certain size before they take you seriously. There's so many layers where people can only say no until you get the right person. Whereas, in 2010, as an example, very happy to hear that you guys don't like SMS OTP. In 2010, we said, guys, this is, you will be hacked. There will be some swaps, phishing, and like, what are you talking about? There's not a lot of education, and you need to gain credibility before they take you seriously. So it's just the inertia of the system, I think it is. There's a lot of goodwill, there's a lot of wanting to solve this. It's a problem that they do take super seriously. But there's so many ideas out there and young companies and this and that. So what actually works? They first, and nobody wants to be first. We've had so many comments in the market that we love it looks cool, but where have you done it before? You have to find that somewhere.
Yeah, I see all of you guys laughing and shaking your head. So just go for it.
So the question keeps on coming up about banks taking security seriously. So in South Africa, if you take the first-rank group, we have over 6 million active clients. And trust me, as soon as anyone gets 1 cent taken off their account, they're on Hello Peter, on every single social media group known to man, and it's in the newspaper. Now, for over 6 million clients, how many F&B or first-rank articles do you see relating to someone who had money removed before you've proven any accountability for who was to blame? The answer is, percentage-wise, 0.00000x of our client base. So we do take it exceptionally seriously. And legally, a lot of the time, the money is not the clients per se. The legal risk sits with the bank. So if the legal risk sits with the bank, then we have to prove that it wasn't our fault. Otherwise, legally, the client has recourse. So we take it exceptionally seriously.
Absolutely. And if anyone suggested otherwise, then you are out of order. And I'm not going to censor you, but I just want you to know.
Just a comment on a question on that. If you work for a corporate or a company, how often do you have to change your password? 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? And I love these articles where people got phished and they say, oh, I didn't click on any link. But they haven't changed their password in 10, 15 years. So you haven't clicked on any links in the past 15 years, yeah? It's, you should take some responsibility yourself.
Yeah. Which brings us back to awareness and education for consumers and for users as well. But Maxine, you were shaking your head. I have a question for you, but I think you have something to say.
Oh, I just wanted to give Pearl some comfort that her 99 Rand and 48 Rand, don't worry, Pearl, I have the same problem every month. And I have the time, hey, so I phone the bank and I'm like, what's going on? And then they'll be like, not our problem, there's a company. And then you phone the company, it's in Cape Town, and they'll say, no, we just take the money off the companies in Durban. We got authorization from Durban. So I phoned Durban, and Durban, 9 out of 10 times I can hear a dog barking in the backyard. So I figured that it's somebody's home. But the good thing to that, because I think as the industry that has been quite a big problem, and usually results in disputes. Did you really give somebody the permission? Did we tick? I mean, I know that we're famous for not reading anything, and unfortunately contracts are such that it's that fine print that we don't quite read. And we just tick away because we're in a hurry and all the rest, and we want to get on with our day. But who knows what permission we've given to people. So it comes back to what responsibility me as the consumer should also be taking. And what I've noticed with the 99 Rand group is that once you get your money returned first, second, and third time, they'll come back the fourth time. They change their name of their coding on the item of your account, but then the fifth time they don't come back. So that they also keep watch. And I suppose they keep trying and seeing, are you vigilant? And so how many of us go through our banking statements, right? And the reason it's 99 Rand is because unless you've asked the bank to open your what is your account service to tick for to ring for even 1 cent, it won't ring. But we also we never ask the banks that. I just have if any 1 cent is leaving, can it please alert me? Most people say, nah, below 100 Rand, you know. But it's that below 100 Rand that they're targeting. So it's 49 Rand, 45 Rand. But the good news that I think is that I think they're almost done with the project. They should be going live soon. That shouldn't be happening. So as a consumer, we will be protected. It's been it's been a long journey, but we're getting there.
Yeah, there's an industry-wide project called Authenticated Collections, which effectively puts the power back into the user to determine who can have debit orders and who can't.
I'm going to stir the pot a little bit, and then I'm going to ask a couple of questions. Then this will be our last round, and then we'll take it from there. But was it Seth? Who said? Was it? Yes. Was it? I think it was you who talked about the government's response. Yes. And I just wanted to be an agent provocateur for just a minute, because, you know, my question is, I mean, if you look at the legislative framework, we've got the cybercrime bill, we've got great organizations and institutions that are committed to harnessing the power of technology to make life better. We've got CSIR. You know, on paper, we've got a lot. And we also have a lot of good work happening within those organizations and institutions. So I'm not here to take anything away from government. What my question, though, is, and it's really a question not just for government, but for banks. We talked a little bit about inertia, and for lots of market leaders. And that's the question of agility. You know, is government gonna ever be agile enough to actually respond in ways that can help us to, beyond, you know, providing the enabling environment, providing the legislative framework, and doing all the things, law enforcement, the things that we expect government to do. I mean, and so when we talk about these big institutions, and not to pick on Rand Merchant Investments, but First Rand Group is huge. It's massive, right? And a lot of the banks in South Africa are really big institutions. They're not small. They're big. They're big guys and gals. So the question is how do we create the kinds of partnerships that allow us to collaborate with perhaps organizations, institutions that are more agile, where you do have lots of smart people? Should that be happening outside or inside, or where should that be happening? Because otherwise, how do we respond in a way that's meaningful? I want you to think about that. That's a question, just a little pot stirring there. I've got a question for Skulk. Let's just move for a second beyond just banks, and let's talk a little bit about supply chains. So supply chains are increasingly connected. We know that. To strengthen ties to customers and optimize supply chains, companies are encouraging vendors and customers to join their networks. Is this connectedness of supply chains making it even more difficult for businesses to protect themselves against cyber attacks? And how can businesses be expected to manage the security policies of their partners and customers, which is part of what we've been talking about?
Yeah. Not really my area of expertise, to be frank. But from where we deal, it's just the more you open your network, and it's obviously all with regards to depends what accesses, but APIs and like it is just more holes. Back to what we said, and IoT and the other devices aren't really in terms of partners, but it's the way to access a network. So yes, the answer is yes, and I think the industry is changing a bit, where it's no longer trying to keep them out, but actually trying to ensure endpoint security between endpoints. And there are ways to look at that, where you can actually establish, mutual SSL between endpoints to ensure that the endpoints on both parties are known. So the entire way of doing security is changing in the industry. No more, this is a dam, we're trying to keep them out. They will get in, so let's ensure that it's rather endpoint to endpoint. So that's how we're seeing it.
Yeah, so you've gone from it as a consumer to the bank, and then we have third parties, and it goes one step further. You then have the fourth parties who attach to the third party. But everything is connected, and therefore a lot of your security is about making friends with reality and saying you are going to be broken into. We often say there's two types of organizations, one that have been broken into, one who don't know they've been broken into. So it's about when it occurs, how do you find it as quickly as possible, and how do you repel it as quickly as possible? And that's where questions around AI, etc., become important. Because you will have someone who's brighter than you are penetrate your network at some stage. That is a reality.
Okay. You've got the mic, Alan, and then I've got a couple of follow-up questions, and then we're going to turn it back over. This pressure isn't going away, right? As we explore the future of banking, it's obviously increasing. The long and short of it is, where does this end? I mean, what are we going to do?
It doesn't end. I think people historically have approached security as like a project. I need to put in a firewall, I need to put in antivirus. It's not a project. Security is business as usual, and it evolves every single day. And the challenge sometimes for us as financial institutions is you've got 1,000 fintechs out there all trying to sell you a solution. When do you have the time to go through every single one and see which one's the best? And I promise you, tomorrow, it's irrelevant because the technology has changed, the risk has changed, the patching has changed, everything's changed. So we are on the back foot in terms of being reactionary. And if I did have the foresight, I wouldn't need the hindsight. So that for me is where the fintechs can help. How do you give us the foresight as opposed to in hindsight saying you needed the following? Here's the leak, here's the vulnerability. But it's an absolute war because they are millions of people trying to break in. How many people can I have trying to keep them out?
Okay, the final question, and then I'm going to turn it over to the floor. And this is for Maxine. Maxine, what are some of the key strategy recommendations that you would make for banks and financial services institutions as to how they can sort of refresh their thinking, their approach to addressing some of the challenges that we've talked about here today? I mean, if you were, I know it's tough, it's broad, but
if you're sitting in South Africa and you're in the banking sector, we're not good people right now. And we're just not good people right now.
As a SADC Banking Association?
No. I'm talking, I said as sitting in South Africa. I'm still going to go across. Okay. So if you're in South Africa and you're in the South African industry, we're just not good people right now. And that's our reality, and we have to deal with that reality. So I suppose it becomes, and it becomes that reality versus trying to serve you, the client, versus our hackers out there, future crime group out there, versus a whole lot of things. And those are just the realities. I mean, sometimes I see the fatigue in the banking sector. You're beginning to see the fatigue, I think. I know for one, I'm fatigued sometimes. I'm like, another meeting? What are we talking about this time? And like, well, some legislation is coming out. Like, what do we have to look at now? But that's the reality. As the SADC Banking Association, we're trying to roll out projects within the region. And you can see the fatigue in the region. We're using the same person to implement a cross-border banking platform. We're using the same person to roll out some project in country that a regulator once rolled out. We're using the same person. I mean, the same person who's multitasking. And we could argue, I mean, we could say it's the expertise, we don't have the capacity, banks are probably downsizing. It's a range of issues. So it's very difficult, honestly, to say what would you put out there. Yes, I think as the sector we have to be vigilant. We have to educate as best as we possibly can, right? As best as we possibly can. So I think everybody has a responsibility there. I think we have an opportunity to work with the regulators. We have an opportunity to work with the likes of Skulk, who are out there cutting edge, Wayne out here, who maybe see things quicker than we would see things because we're bogged down with what we're bogged down with.
Us too, CDT.
Yeah, CDT. Half the time we're bogged down just with regulation. I mean, you've heard that in South Africa, the recent FIC bills come through, which means we're going to have to start changing some of our banking systems in the back end because we now need to incorporate more detail in our message sending systems. What messages government wants to see because they're tracking people who are busy with money laundering and all the rest. So an overhaul of systems, right? So this is the fatigue you're beginning to see. And yes, maybe we should find ways of not, I don't think it's running away. We just have to engage better, I suppose, and create those collaborations, I suppose. Look, from a regulatory point, you have enough regulation to kill you, right? You just heard what he had to say just now. That was enough regulation. So it's not as if there isn't any regulation in countries. You have enough. I suppose it will be about how do we execute the regulation? Do we know about the regulation? Alan earlier on was saying if he sees a threat in his system, who's his go-to person? Who is his FBI out there? So I'm saying, there are lots of government departments you can call. He's like, who's my FBI? Who do I call to say there's a threat happening? It's Sunday. That's his reality, right? So I think it affords us the opportunity, and I know we are working very closely with various government departments, but it also just affords us that closer working relationship. Yeah, I suppose we're bogged down with regulation, and I see it in every country. And also we're bogged down with putting in, so each country to its own. 2 years ago when we were rolling out a project, and we said, why haven't you started on what we wanted you guys to start on? They're like, no, we're busy with check truncation. So yeah, so everybody except South Africa was busy implementing checks. And we're like, who uses checks? We don't use checks. But guess what? Right? That's a directive in that country. Everybody should implement check truncation. So I think regulation, you have enough regulation, trust me. Regulation, I think we're overburdened with regulation. And the other thing about regulation is we have to pump resources into this regulation. Because if I had just one person who was working on a desk, I now have 20 more that I need to make sure that we're enforcing the regulation the government wants us to execute, right? So I think that the takeaway for me really is collaboration. I wouldn't be adding any more regulation. Well, it's through our ears, trust me. I think there's also an opportunity for education, great amount of education. And I think maybe we shouldn't be the only ones doing education. There are a whole lot of other organizations out there who could join the boat of education. So lots of opportunities for lots of different things. And if you just listen to the discussion that the colleagues have raised here, I was just thinking to myself, there's such a lot going on out there. But from my space where I am at, because we do more advocacy work and more work probably around your regulation and stuff like that, there's not stuff that we're exposed to. So I don't sit with systems per se. The banks that belong to the association sit with the systems. So I'll only hear about some of the stuff either because I'm a customer, so my 99 Rand story, or because I like to play devil's advocate. So I like to know when we've rolled out what we've rolled out to our clients, I like to play that client that goes in with the knowledge that I have to ask particular questions when I walk into a bank, which you probably necessarily won't ask a bank. And so I think a lot of opportunity for education, for collaboration, and so Alan said to me a bit earlier that we're lacking some skills in particular areas of IT because Skulk over there offers them the mountain, right? Cape Town. And they don't want to come to Johannesburg. How's that? So those are the realities and things we're going to have to start thinking about. If you're going to be offering somebody a job who's got the expertise, do they really want to make that move to a Johannesburg? They have the beach in their, they open their door, they fall into the ocean. They're happy with that. And that's the thing about, I think, the new kid on the block, the Y generation who've got the time. That's a lifestyle they want to live. Whereas we could be happy sitting in Sandton and it's brick and mortar. But that's a lifestyle. So where are we getting these skills for what we would need as well to do within the sector?
Very interesting. Got some interesting follow-ups for her, but I promised that I would turn it over to you all. And then I'm going to take some questions, some comments, then I'm going to give you an opportunity to wrap it up from your point of view, and then we'll go and have some drinks and we can keep talking. Is that okay? Okay, so we're going to make our way around the room, and we'll start. I'm sorry, with Dominique.
Hi, so
Yep.
Dominique here again. Just 2 comments. I mean, I think the first one, you just in response to what you were saying is, why is there inertia, and what do we need to do more of? The thing that I feel quite strongly about is that I think, particularly around the issue around cybersecurity and financial crime, is that I think, and Skulk would probably agree with me, is that I think this is not a conversation that can sit just with the technology department anymore. This is a business conversation. A lot of the work we do from an AlphaCode perspective is that bridge between fintech and corporates. So a lot of our job is how do we have conversations with our portfolio companies about how do we enable pilots, proof of concepts, projects between these young startup companies and the banks or the insurance companies. And certainly what we've seen is that where these conversations used to stay very much in the technology domain, where our conversation is happening at the C-level and at the board levels, we're saying, unfortunately, these are not topics that you can say, sorry, I need my IT guy in the room. These are conversations that have to be held at a business level. And that goes for banks, it goes for insurers, it goes for governments. You can't just put it into, okay, my IT security guy will deal with it, because it's becoming a way of life. And I think that idea of, collaboration is a word that's thrown around a lot. We try actually make something happen with the collaboration, and really what it comes down to is actually formalizing a way of doing pilots, proof of concepts, actually understanding that certain areas like cybercrime and, for example, what Skulk does at Intersect, and I know I'm punting him a lot, clearly, I've got vested interest here, but
He's not complaining.
there are certain things, particularly in the security world, which are so highly specialized that it doesn't make sense for each bank to replicate it. Right. If I look at you were talking about the level of skills and resources that sit in South Africa. Skulk is sitting with 40 specialists in his business. The banks aren't going to be able to recruit 40 specialists into there because there's just not that talent pool each. So I think there needs to be a recognition in the industry that you, on this particular topic, and there's other topics in the financial services spectrum, that you have to work with specialists. It is a business conversation. It's not just a technology conversation, and you've got to get your heads around how you actually engage with the specialists on this.
Yeah, well said. And at AlphaCode, you are bank agnostic, right? So do you have the opportunity to work with other, with folks? I mean, would you be willing to work with folks who are backed by other banks? I mean, yeah.
I mean, in fact, our investment into Intersect has been done alongside Nedbank. We've got another investment in another business where we've actually facilitated a pilot with Standard Bank. So to the extent that we can, we work with our portfolio companies. We've got a preferred nation status. But our job here more is to facilitate the next frontier of financial services and to work with the most forward-thinking organizations in the industry. And if I look at what Intersect has done, they actually work with all the banks in South Africa, except our own.
Woo, okay, moving right along.
But it is an important, this concept of collaboration and
Yeah.
cooperation, it is what we are established here to do across the South African financial services landscape. But it's not, the one thing I can say is it's not a challenge that just South African banks deal with, getting their heads around this. When I speak to my counterparts in the UK and in the US, banks globally struggle with this, and they're lagging behind because of it, because they don't know how to work with fintechs.
As a matter of fact, I have to say that a lot of the security measures that were put in place by South African banks, I'd go back to the United States, and the banks there hadn't implemented those measures, right? So South African banks were actually ahead in some ways, and I guess we have to be. So one of the questions that I think that you've alluded to as well, Maxine, is you talked about the skills. We know that we're sitting with a lot of it in the room. Skulks talked about the systems that we get that we put in place. My question is that we're sitting here, we're in a space where people innovate, they ideate, they create new things. Why can't we create our own systems? I mean, what are we dropping in terms of the cybersecurity systems, and are we creating our own our own stuff here that we can then sell to other people? How does this question of cybercrime, this increase in cyber attacks in South Africa, become an opportunity for us to move ahead and lead the world in terms of what it is that we're doing? It's a question. You can throw it out there. Got some comments? Sorry. Is that what Skulk? That's what Skulk. Okay, she said that's what Skulk's doing. So I'm going to give them a chance to respond. Don't worry. All right.
Good evening. My name is Sia. I am a resident startup based here in AlphaCode. Just a quick question around financial inclusion and the previously unbanked and security around those guys. I mean, we've seen with Net1 and their scandals, with Alan Gray investing in them, with the World Bank even investing in them, stealing from the poor, basically. How are banks actually educating the poor of the poorest? And by education, I mean, a person from Ulundi who speaks pure Zulu, who does not understand a pamphlet from FNB that says, if you do this, you'll get scammed. How are banks reacting to that, and are they willing to collaborate with people that are actually on the ground and dealing with such people on a daily basis?
Are there other banks in the room who want to respond to that? Yes? No?
So I just want to make it clear, I don't work for FNB. Hey?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
No, so we're always open to collaboration on ways in which we can make things more effective and more secure. And if you take something like e-wallet, it allows people to get access to financial services without having a bank account. What we do get constrained with sometimes is things like the feasible that says you do need an ID and you do need a proof of residence to be financially inclusive. And then if you don't have that, I'm not allowed to supply you banking services. But if I do, I break the law. So one place where we are working with government is to say, how do we, in those areas where the person doesn't have it, do we give basic banking services which are not illegal for us to give? Because I think where government's been quite clever is they've come up with a lot of laws, but they leave the implementation to the bank. And then they come and audit the bank. And if the bank hasn't followed the process, we get a regulatory fine. So it becomes a bit of a double-edged sword. I mean, it's easy to say, here's the law, but now you actually have to implement it. But always open to saying, what are the techniques? And we've done a lot on the F&B side for like elderly people who were being ripped off by people in old age homes caring for them. There's a lot of stuff that the guys do put in place. And again, taking away from SIM swaps and moving to the app is another one where people who are not educated would give someone their SIM, would give someone their ATM card. Is there more we can do? Absolutely. Are we open to ideas? Absolutely.
I'm coming to you now. He had the mic, and then I'm going to come to you. Yes.
All right, just back to the whole compliance and regulation thing. I think we've all realized now that no amount of compliance and regulation can really effectively cure all the vulnerabilities. So we're spending millions as organizations, and like Dominique said, this is no longer just a technology budget, it's a business budget. It's business continuity. So other companies or crime syndicates are spending millions, and they don't have the tie downs of regulation. They can spend those millions freely to exploit your regulated systems. So once again, it does kind of come back to the responsibility, but I can't really see that the responsibility is the user, because in any system the weakest link is the user, and we can educate and help as much as we can, but it's only going to help to a certain point. I think the real power is going to come in businesses and processes, systems that use multi-factor authentication. And I also feel that we should not be looking at functionality as a primary objective in terms of systems, but rather security as a primary objective. If it works, but it doesn't work securely, then it doesn't work. So I think it's a big mindset change. I hope that my hope that the NHS hack will kind of bring to light what is really still out there that we've been kind of shied away from. But definitely from the banks and financial institutions side, there needs to be more focus on the software and system development life cycle to implement security right from the beginning, and not taking it as an afterthought and only implementing it once something bad happens.
So just a few things, and a comment was made earlier about where security fits in the value chain. For me, in the next 5 years, you'll find more of your CISOs reporting into CEO. There's a strong IT element, but understanding your risk, understanding your posture, and understanding how much you're prepared to take is a business call. It's not an IT call. There's a lot of IT, but it's a business call, and I don't think most businesses have understood it as a business capability. Legislation for us is not the benchmark we try to reach. Remember, things like legislation is the lowest common denominator that everyone has to comply with. That's the starting point. So if you think legislation is what you're aiming for, there's a problem. That becomes your bottom, that everyone has to comply with, and how do you take it higher? But yes, we are still more reactionary than proactive. And I think most institutions left it too late and are playing catch up. And I just hope that all of them can play catch up fast enough so that they're on the same edge as the people hacking in, like the WikiLeaks releasing 100 odd things. You're playing catch up. Yeah, so it's how do we get further up the curve? There's less catch up and more proactive thinking.
Hi, Dylan from DocFox. We've implemented a digital FICA solution. So I guess my question, going back to your comments, Alan, specifically is, when do we believe industry and big corporates are going to fundamentally accept the fact that they are in an inertia phase and look at actually leveraging software that's out there to not have to self-build solutions or keep intact solutions that they've built, to actually go and revolutionize and add the value back to, from a taking that step up from a risk-based perspective? And do we ever believe that that transition is going to happen?
It will happen, but it'll happen slowly. So historically, majority of their banks would say we build first, and then we buy, and then last but not least, how do we get leverage off where the technology already sits in the organization? It was very much a not invented here. Whereas now you look and say, do we do cloud first? Do we buy second? Do we leverage third? And do we build last? Because historically, I could get scale out of building stuff my own and having my own skills. But with the rate of change that you see, you just can't compete with an IT company that has 5,000 devs or a security company that has 40 specialists within a specific field. Those days are over. Does that mean I can miraculously change what I've got to that paradigm? No. So security being one, we have the best part of 0 homegrown security systems. We will do honeypots from this company. We will use a SIEM from this company. We will use DDoS solutions from Radware as an example. Those are not things we look to build because fundamentally we're a financial institution. We're not a security company at its core. Do we use companies like a Telspace to break in to test certain things? Yes. We don't just rely on our own skill set.
One more question, Andrew?
One more. Thanks, Sharon. So, I mean, I come at this from a very non-techie perspective. I'm independent at the moment, but I spent 20 years in another 170-year-old dinosaur, but an insurance company. And I think what's really hard about the problem is that you've got the funky edge of the business where you're rolling out new toys to customers, and you try to spend money on what we're talking about, the security. But there's a big chunk of your architecture which is what's actually paying the bills, and it's 60 years old, and it was written in the 60s, and nobody knows the code. And a big part of your spend has to go on because that's where the profits are coming from. So I was wondering, Wayne, sort of from what I understood from what you're pitching to companies who are taking the whole business into this brave new world, I mean, as a non-techie executive, how do you think about this? How much do you need to think about the culture and the people to navigate this world, where you allocate your money on toys versus security? So if you can maybe just sort of dumb it down to the non-techie way to think in this world.
Well, as a non-techie, that's really not hard. The specialist in dumbing it down. We as Africans, if you're not going to come up with a solution that takes legacy very seriously, I think you're wasting your time. This is not Luxembourg or Switzerland where they can rip and replace, and because there's only 400,000 people in the country. We've got a legacy issue here. We've got an educational issue here. There's incredible investment, to solve particular problems. And so we believe solutions must very much abandon a rip and replace, and rather integrate in what's there. And when lifespans have been reached, that what you now replace with is smarter and better. And again, we very anti OEM silos. You must be able to integrate into whatever is the latest, greatest right now. And even if you're mid-deployment and something else comes out that's better than what you're busy using, you must be able to, on an agile basis, adapt to that. And we think that's key. So that's very much something we've adopted, and that's possibly why we are enjoying a little bit more success than the others out there, because everybody's coming out with the latest, greatest, assuming this is the line in the sand, and everybody moves from there. But you've got to incorporate, as you said, 60 years worth of legacy, and take companies forward with you. You don't want to make these guys already tough jobs harder by going, well, this investment we made 5 years ago of X billion is now obsolete. Make it work, help it achieve what it was originally set out to do, and as you move forward, make it simpler.
The comment was made earlier about security first. I've not had a single security item decline from a budget point of view in the last 2 years. It's very much, if that's what's needed and the risk is understood, the answer is yes. The money has to come from somewhere else. Because we cannot sit back and not do something that's incumbent on us to do that we know. It's just, you can't go and say, we knew there was a risk, we did nothing about it, and guess what? Either our money or our client's money got stolen. That would be extremely irresponsible of the bank. So not to say budget's not a constraint on security, budget's always a constraint, but we'll find money for a security project before we find money for another project.
Just what we've seen in the market is that security is from a banking perspective, apart from your office, is a grudge purchase, because business normally has the budget and they spend because they'd rather have the shiny new product that a customer can have out there, and not necessarily a security product. But what we've seen is security actually enables a lot of things. It doesn't only stop fraud. What we've seen is that certain customers customers trust us. They transact more. One of our customers is literally saving millions of dollars a month because they can provide more services on the mobile platform. Customers don't go to the branches. We see other guys in terms of Germany, and I think in South Africa as well, that on the card transacting, because customers are trained, they know this, they trust it. Their transacting actually went up by close to 80%. It's literally, you just see the graph going up, fraud obviously down, transacting and successful transactions up. So you can actually invest in security and make money from it because people trust these channels and they leverage and they use it. It's just you have to balance user experience and ensure that the customers feel comfortable. And I think, with tech out there, it can be done now.
This is what I'd like to do. Hold your response. What I'd like to do is I'm going to take the last questions, comments from the floor. Please be brief because I promised to release you now, and we'd like to have some closing comments. And then you can just jump on them and just keep them from leaving. And then grab some wine, grab a beer, and just be like, you got to talk to them. So one, and then who's got the mic here?
Too much.
Please be brief, okay? And then that's it. And then we're going to give you a chance to boom, 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 and then wrap. Okay, yeah.
Okay, mine's very brief this time. So so the technology that's used here, it usually relies on mobile delivery mechanisms like your cell phone companies and stuff like that. So my question is, how are I'm like, it's possible that some of the leaks or some of the breaches happen on the mobile company side. So how are these mobile companies collaborating with you guys, given that they are part of, the solution? Okay. Are they collaborating, and are they coming to the party in terms of protecting consumers and making sure that the systems are secure?
Okay. In terms of SIM swap detection, answer is yes. They do give you information. Strangely enough, that a lot of the operators gave their SIM swap information for free, which turns out to be a problem because now they don't really care about it. But if you deploy a correct solution, as we do, use a mutual PKI, we don't really care what the network is. You take the SIM card out, it's still fine. It's encrypted on the device, decrypted on an HSM behind the bank's firewall, which means what's the difference between a mobile telco operator really or the internet? Where's the traffic going? So you need to ensure that the endpoint is identified, that it's secure, and that all comms and everything is encrypted end to end between that device and the identified endpoint being the bank.
Hi, Anthony Stewart from Wax Mobile. Today's session is called The Future of Crime in Financial Services. And I just wanted to know from you guys, what do you see as being the big disruptive things that are coming down that you guys know of when it comes to cybersecurity? For instance, like when you talk, Alan, about you need to protect the data, and where you look at blockchain is slightly different. It says, well, take the data and replicate it across 1 million different places, and then take that and see which all agrees and change that. That kind of turned a lot of thinking on its head. Is there thinking like that that's coming down the line in fin crime, basically?
Okay, don't answer that because that was my last question to them. Okay, so was there anything else here? Yeah,
that was my question.
Was that your question? Okay, you guys are smart. You're all good. Okay, and then there was this gentleman, and then that's it. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Luan. I don't want to actually ask a question. I just want to make a comment. I've been in the security industry for quite a while. I've been an ex-ethical hacker, if you want to call it that. And from experience, I actually just want to congratulate the South African banks in general. I think that you're actually doing an amazing job compared to worldwide standards in general.
I'll give you your money when we leave tonight. Huh?
Okay, so now your wrap up, closing thoughts, the future of crime, where are we going, what's it going to be, what are your predictions as Afrofuturist? Starting with you, yeah.
Okay. I think a lot of what's said is actually the way it's going to go. You need to involve the user. You need to ensure that the user actually can protect themselves without being told, do this, don't do that. I think it's a combination. I think you need to find specialists. We've been in a very fortunate position that because we do, across the globe fraud, it moves. You see one attack in Europe, and then it goes to Australia, and then it goes to it was a piece of malware as an example that went just in time for the Rio Olympics. It was Zeus malware. So on a bunch of occasions where we had on the iOS as an example, SSL issues there where it was implemented wrong, our customers are like, whoa, what do we need to do? Like, don't worry, You know, we've experienced this. You don't need to patch anything. We're looking after you. And I think banks need to focus on what they're good at, which is their customer, looking after that and find the experts. But of course, they need, you know, there's other aspects, the network itself, the honeypots and all these things. But on the last side, on the last mile, I think, you know, from our perspective, when we've seen this, certainly, it is an expert and you need to find them there. So this is a bigger bullet, thicker armor game. It's constantly changing. We invest all our time and effort in that. We use a lot of ethical hackers as well, SensePost, MWR, all those guys, train all our staff on this. So it's just a mindset that you need to look after. So I think to see where it's going, it's changing so quickly that we need to remain on top of this.
Yeah, I'm not going to repeat any of that. I mean, you made the point on blockchain. The fundamental part of that is the cryptography, which ensures the security. I don't like the anonymous part because then the guy says pay the Bitcoin to this address. But the cryptography, being the security first, became the key. That you could trust that that was that person, not where it was stored. So again, it comes back to putting the security first. If people didn't believe in that technology, no one would use that tech. So it has to be about that security. I don't care whether, that's why it's okay. Have you secured that data? Do you know whose it is? If the answer is yes, it's about the data. It's not about where it was stored.
So I think I'll end off by responding to Sia. I think we didn't respond to Sia. Sia, from a banking association point, financial inclusion, one of our biggest things. Yes, there are people out there that need to be educated. The good thing about the court case that we didn't even know about ourselves because we didn't know the contract, what was involved in it, is court cases are good because it revealed a lot. But you know, the court case aside, I think that was a government contract, and I think government was the one that engaged the service provider, and one would have hoped that the necessary regulation, etc., around that would have kicked in. But like I say, court cases are very interesting. In terms of yes, you would have your grandmother out there in Ulundi who doesn't speak English. What you are seeing, I think, and I want to put my hand out on this one, but I've seen a lot of literature in a lot of our 11 languages. You could say to me, but she hasn't been to school. So what we do try and do is in each of those branches, you should find somebody who is from the community who will be able to work with the client that comes in. I had the opportunity of being invited by one of the banks in South Africa to one of their initiatives. And what they have done is they were working in a village. They had a champion in the village. So the champion would bring, when they were deploying a new product into the market, they would get that champion, got the champion to understand the product. The champion went into the village, worked with the community there, and this was in Matatiele, worked with the community there. And when she felt that the community was now understanding and were ready to now use the product, was now able to then take them to the bank, and that's how it worked. So I think we don't hear those stories every day, I know, but there is room for more of those stories, and there is more room for more financial education. But I believe the banks are doing as best as they possibly can. You will see maybe not necessarily a bank, but a community, an organization in the community that's actually assisting the bank do that work.
Where cybercrime is going, well, as long as technology keeps advancing, there are going to be guys finding ways to use that, to exploit that for their own use, and we'll just have to stay ahead of them. South Africans are resilient. You know, as a venture capitalist in this country, it's exciting for me because I've seen a rise of solutions homegrown to world problems that stand up there and can go toe-to-toe with the best, despite our limited budgets here, you know, and the fact that we're doing rands versus dollars. So I think you know, the fact that we've learned to fight bodes well.
Give our panelists, please, a round of applause. You guys can get off those stools. But we just wanted to, I wanted to give Dr. Mua, who's the chair of CDT, the opportunity to
I just want to thank the panelists for making time to join us this evening. This is our first event for CDT. And we hope we could work with R&B probably to move forward. We are looking at future salon, looking at future banking, future medicine, future government, future dating, and future parenting. You know, parenting these days have become new. Children these days can do something different than what you used to do. And it all can because technology is having major impact on humanity. And what we are trying to do is to help humanity to navigate and manage these changes for our common good, for our common good. So we want to invite you, and we are going to put you on our mailing list, and we want you to participate in all our Speaker Salon, and we want you to enjoy with us. Today, I must also, for the first time, just congratulate those hackers who boldly said they are ethical hackers. You know, some of us haven't seen hackers before, and I'm so great that you were able to tell us you are ethical one. You know, like having a good Judas. I don't know whether that really exists. But thank you very much. And I also thank you very much for giving credit to South African banking and the fact that this is born out of experience, it's not theoretical. And when we were thinking of having this topic, we wanted to have a real-life hacker. Yeah. And so please look at these two guys. I'm sure you must be able to probably. So until I see you in our next Speaker Salon, just enjoy yourself and good night. Bye-bye.